All right, when you hear the term self-care, what's the first thing that pops into your head? A bubble bath? A meditation app? Maybe a weekend getaway? Well, today we're going to completely reframe that whole idea. We're talking about the kind of self-care that doesn't just add something else to your to-do list, but actually, fundamentally protects your time and your energy. Okay, let's dive in.
This quote, it really hits home for so many of us, right? It's that feeling of being stretched so thin, pulled in a dozen different directions all at once. It's that end-of-the-day feeling of overwhelm, where the lines between your professional life and your personal life just kind of melt away.
I am willing to bet it does. That feeling, it's not just a bad day anymore. For a lot of people, it's the new normal. It's like this low hum of burnout that's always in the background of our lives, and it's a huge sign that something has to change. The problem isn't that you're not taking enough bubble baths, it's that you don't have enough boundaries. So let's start by really unpacking that problem. We're basically living through a burnout epidemic, and it's fueled in large part by the very technologies and work setups that were supposed to give us more freedom. That clear separation we used to have between work and life has gotten incredibly fuzzy. And this really captures the central paradox of remote work. A 2024 study laid it out perfectly. On the one hand, yeah, we get these amazing benefits, tons of flexibility, more autonomy, no commute, which is awesome. But on the other hand, those exact same freedoms can lead to working longer hours, having less time to actually recover, and, you guessed it, those blurred boundaries we keep talking about. It is a classic double-edged sword. And look, this pressure doesn't just stop with our jobs. In our personal lives, we face a really similar risk. A psychotherapist I was reading explained that without emotional boundaries, if someone close to you is angry or upset, you can find yourself just absorbing those feelings, getting all tangled up in emotions that, well, they aren't even yours to begin with. And the consequences of this are pretty serious. Psychologists have terms for it, like enmeshment or codependency, where the lines between you and another person get so blurry that you actually start to lose your own sense of self. It's a direct path to emotional burnout, and ironically, it often ends up creating more conflict and resentment in the very relationships you're trying so hard to protect. So, what's the solution here? This brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer. Real self-care. It isn't about adding another appointment to your already jam-packed calendar. No, it's about building a fence to protect the calendar you already have. So, researchers have this structured three-part process they call self-care, with a capital C. It starts with value. That means truly, genuinely prioritizing your own health. Then comes awareness. That's recognizing your personal signs of stress. And finally, you have to translate all of that into behavior, actively taking steps to protect your well-being. So think of it as a skill, not some luxury. And this is exactly where emotional boundaries come into play. They're basically the practical application of self-care. They are the limits you consciously, deliberately place on the energy you give out and the energy you take in. It's all about creating emotional safety for yourself in every single relationship, whether it's with your boss or your partner. But let's be real for a second. If this was easy, everybody would already be doing it. We all know boundaries are important, but actually setting them? It can feel incredibly difficult, totally awkward, and maybe even a little selfish. So why is there so much friction? Well, there are so many common barriers. We're afraid of being judged or rejected. That deep human need to connect makes us worry that boundaries will just push people away. At work, we're facing these intense expectations around productivity. For some of us, it's more personal. Low self-esteem or maybe a need to fix everyone else's problems can make it feel impossible to say no. And for a lot of us, it's simple. We just were never taught how. This quote from the researcher Brené Brown is a total game changer. It reframes the entire act. Setting a boundary is not an act of aggression or selfishness. It's an act of clarity. It's just being honest about what you can and can't do. And by being clear, you're being kind to yourself and to the other person, because it lets them know exactly where they stand. Okay, so we get the problem, we get the solution. Now for the really practical part. How do we actually do it? Let's build an action plan. Here's a simple 3-step toolkit to get you started. Now, this framework was originally for case managers, but trust me, it applies to absolutely everyone. It starts with the most important step, giving yourself permission. You have to believe it is okay to say no. Then you do a little self-assessment. Get really honest with yourself. Where are you leaking the most energy? Is it with a specific person? Is it a certain task that always pops up after 5 p.m.? And finally, you make a plan. Don't just wish for it. Define it. Make it specific, measurable, something you can actually achieve. So once you have your plan, communication is everything. The key is how you deliver the message. You got to pick a calm time, not in the heat of the moment. Use I statements to own your needs. So for example, say, I need to log off at 6 p.m. to recharge, instead of something more accusatory like, you're always messaging me after hours. Be direct but not harsh. And remember, this is not a one-and-done conversation. It's an ongoing process. All right, so you've done the hard work of setting and communicating your boundaries. What's the payoff? Well, it's not just a feeling. There is real hard science behind the benefits of protecting your well-being. So, data from that Frontier study shows something pretty fascinating. On average, people practice more of these self-care behaviors when they're working from home compared to being in the office. It kind of suggests the environment itself, that extra flexibility and autonomy, just makes it easier for us to prioritize our own well-being. But here's the kicker. The study also found that for people who work from home more often, like more days per week, the positive effects of self-care are actually amplified. So why is that? It probably comes back to control. When you have consistent autonomy, you get more practice consciously designing and defending that line between your work and your life, which makes those self-care actions way more impactful. And what are those effects exactly? Well, the data is crystal clear. People who score higher on self-care report less psychological strain, they have fewer physical health complaints, they get more time for genuine relaxation and recovery, and they even rate their own work performance as being higher. So setting boundaries doesn't just make you feel better, it can actually make you better at your job. So the crucial point in all of this is this. True self-care isn't another item on your checklist. It's not some fancy indulgence. It is the foundational protective act of building and maintaining boundaries within the life you already lead. It's about subtraction, not addition. Which leaves us with a final question to think about. This doesn't have to be some massive life overhaul. Just think about one small fence you can build. What is one boundary that you can set today, like right now, to start protecting your time, your energy, and your well-being?